Thank you so much for coming and joining us on this webinar. I'm really excited to talk about it. I am Nicole Christensen, the president of Care Answered, at which we provide patient advocacy and care coordination, helping people through the most challenging times of their care needs. And I am also the author of From Crisis to Calm. I'm here with two fabulous presenters, Teresa Steinkamp and Elizabeth Vaz. And we're going to get started right away because we have a lot to cover. This is a quote that I put in my book as well by Rosalind Carter. There are only 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And that's all of us. And I'm going to go through a few caregiving stats and then kind of some answers and tips to avoid these situations. The first is about being a caregiver and the emotional ties. So 80% of baby boomers reported strains on their relationships who are caregivers. 46% of baby boomers stated that caregiving damaged their romantic relationships. 25% said divorced baby boomers said caregiving played a major role in their divorce. And baby boomers who are working full-time are providing financial assistance to aging parents and or have aging parents living with them are the greatest risk of marital strain. So this is a real thing that so many of us are going through. And again, Liz will have some tips for us. Now, the next thing I want to point out is the financial implications. So the nation's 48 million unpaid caregivers are not only dedicating their time and efforts to the well-being of their loved one, most of them are spending their own money on caregiving expenses. This is according to the AARP Caregiving Out-of-Pocket Cost Study. And on average, caregivers spend 1/4 of their annual income on caregiving expenses. 49% of caregivers are working full or part-time. So again, a lot of those that are providing this care, whether it's in the home, outside of the home, long distance, it all plays a part. And there's something that I wanted to let you know about as far as policy is concerned. So there is the Credit for Caring Act that came up in 2021, and it's a bipartisan bill. And it would provide up to $5,000 in federal tax credit for eligible working family caregivers, which can be a great deal of financial support. So if you'd like to know more about it and or get in touch with your representative to let them know that you would like this bill to pass, your voice matters. So there is the website there. Again, it's called Credit for Caring Act. You can look it up yourself. As well as that link there will actually let you know which representative that you would contact. So in that caregiving, let's talk a little bit about spousal caregiving, because 10% of these caregivers that we just talked about are caring for a spouse. And caregiving spouses tend to their loved one needs on average 44.6 hours a week. So we know that caregiving is a full-time job, but this kind of brings it home, doesn't it? It's more than a full-time job. And the fact that we're living longer means that it's likely going to be us needing the care or providing the care or both. So Care Answered actually has a new initiative this year, which was at first called the Health Proxy Partner. And it's now being called the Care Control Partner, because that's what it's about. It's about taking control of your own care, making sure that what you want done is actually done, which eases the burden on your potential caregiver. Or if you are a caregiver, having these conversations, making all of these decisions now, while the people you love and you're caring for can make those decisions, is so vitally important. So what we're doing is partnering with healthcare proxies or people that would be healthcare proxies working with their clinicians as well as their attorneys to make sure these important conversations are happening and then that they're documented. So healthcare proxy and medically ordered life-sustaining treatment forms or advanced directives, living wills, making sure that everything is in place so that, again, you're taking control of your care, your needs and wishes are known, and then they can be met for ourselves and for the people that we're providing care. So without further ado, I'll introduce Teresa Steinkamp, who is a CPA and a financial advisor, talking to us about the tips financially that we can do, whether we're in it right now or we're planning, because we know that, again, we're going to be one of those 4 things, and making sure that we have the tools in hand. Okay, Teresa, why don't you start while I figure out how to change the view?
No problem. And I know there's a little delay. I mentioned to Nicole on my camera, so I'm just going to switch over to my, I don't know if my headshot's up, but so we had a couple slides prepared for you guys today. And thank you for that info, Nicole. It's really helpful. Hopefully I'm not beating you guys over the head with too many boring things. I'm going to try to keep it a little interesting. And as Nicole mentioned, if there's anything that you know, if I run past something, you have questions on it, or if I don't address something and you want to talk about it, definitely add that as a comment in the chat and we'll go through that together. So as Nicole mentioned, I'm a CPA and also a financial advisor. So from time to time, for the most part, I'm looking at things from that financial advisor hat. But then I'm also, you know, I can't help but look at it from a CPA standpoint as well. So, you know, there's different people dealing with different issues, and they're at different stages of caregiving with their loved ones. So it could be something where we're just, you know, you're just at the start of it, you're preparing to be in that phase, right? Maybe it's a parent, right? That's typically when we tend to know it's coming. And then there's other scenarios where we don't know it's coming. So it tends to be a little bit more of a surprise. And the audience here today could be individuals who are, who've already, you know, started that process. They're already knee deep in it. Or it could be people that they haven't gotten there yet. They want to understand, they want to start to wrap their head around, what does this look like? What should I be worried about from a financial standpoint? What are the questions to ask? So, you know, we'll cover a couple of those different areas. You know, I was hoping in the first couple slides to talk about general areas, and maybe that's a reminder for people who've already been caregivers and started that process to go back and look at some of these things. So I didn't want to repeat too much of that. But in general, one thing I always want to point out is, look, I get it. It's really hard for me to ask for help, but I would encourage everybody who's here, who's tuning in, who's a caregiver, ask for help. You know, these are times when you're emotionally drained, and so we don't always make the clearest decisions around things that can be fairly complicated. So, you know, call your CPA, call your accountant, call your financial advisor, ask your attorney. If you've had a friend or loved one that has gone through it, pick their brain on things. It may not be something that right now you're dealing with, but that might be around the corner, you know, this thing that they encountered. So as much knowledge as you can gather, I think the more helpful it'll be. And if you can delegate certain tasks off your plate to those people, that's going to be a huge help. And personally, I can see the stress of making some of these decisions when you don't have the pressure of caregiving. So to be able to remove that component and utilize somebody who's knowledgeable in this area is going to be really helpful for you and for your own mental health and you know, therefore for your person that you're caring for. So one other thing that's really important is, you know, ask your loved one what if there's anything in particular that is important to them that they want to make sure happens, whether it be from their assets or from a caregiving standpoint, just make sure you have that conversation. You never want to make decisions and then find out after the fact that, parents or loved ones said, oh, I didn't want that, or it's, and a lot of these decisions, they're hard to reverse, right? So you want to make sure they are correct out of the gate. So for what I would like to suggest as kind of a starting point is really document everything that's on hand for that person that you're caring for. Often, let's say it is a parent, there's accounts that are kind of scattered everywhere. They don't know what the account numbers are. They haven't looked at a statement in forever. And so it's a really healthy exercise to just start to document all of that stuff. Which institution is it at? What's the account number? How is the account titled? That's actually really important because it's going to dictate if something happens to them, who has control, who can call in, or how does it transfer, right? So if I have a checking account and it's TOD, how does that actually, does that mean it transfers on death, or does that mean, this other thing? And also, you'll delve into, is that really how it should be, through further discussions. So that, cataloging all these things, the retirement accounts, pensions, older individuals have fewer, in my experience, of these accounts because they worked at certain places longer. Younger individuals, right? So I might work with somebody in their 40s who is diagnosed with cancer. For them, they've worked a couple of different jobs, right? They might have things scattered all over the place. So you want to know where everything is. And frankly, I talk to 30-year-olds where they're like, yeah, I don't know where all my accounts are. So it's really common at every age to have that. Then the other aspect of it is, what are the tax implications of taking distributions out of these retirement accounts or pensions? Here is where I would say lean on your financial advisor. Pensions in particular can be very tricky. So there's the single life, there's the spousal, there's the pop-up, there's this, there's that. Every pension plan is different. So you want to understand, what did my parents elect or my loved one elect? If they didn't elect it yet, what are the options there? What are some, when do I have to make those choices? And then the other side of it is that there's ways to actually borrow off of these assets that rather than liquidating them. So you might want to work with, again, your advisor might say, hey, you've had this market's done really well over all these years in this investment account. You may not want to liquidate these positions. You may want to just borrow against it, so that'll accomplish two things. You won't have the capital gains taxes, and then also you don't need to worry about selling off at a time where maybe the market's not in a good place to sell. So next up is Nicole. Yep, perfect. So long-term care insurance, obviously one of those things in these situations that's great to have, not so common, right? So parents might have it. It's a little more common with that age group. So the older policies, in my experience, tend to have a little bit more robust coverage. The newer ones, a little bit more challenging. So you want to work with either, call or work with your advisor to understand. One of the important aspects here is that you may not need to have a permanent issue to be able to actually use your long-term care insurance. And that also applies for your disability insurance. So you could have a scenario where, look, if you're unable to work for, the client I mentioned before in her 40s with breast cancer, she's a perfect example of that. She's likely going to recover. And so most people in their mind, they think disability or they think long-term care, and they assume it's a permanent, circumstance. And that's not the case. So the question you want to ask around that is, like, what are the qualifications to meet that coverage level? What does disability mean? And disability can be tricky because if you guys have ever dealt with the Social Security Administration versus personal policies or policies through work, each of those define, quote unquote, disability very differently. So you want to try to understand, well, how do I meet that criteria? And then also on the flip side, how do I make sure that if there's some kind of timeline where I have a 90-day period before I start receiving benefits, I want to make sure I start the clock Now that does two things. It enables me to have the benefits paid out at that 90-day mark or 120-day mark, whatever it is. But it also will shortcut you if, let's say, you have another issue, whether it's the same thing or something else potentially, a year or so later, right? You already kind of cut the line, you've hit that 90-day mark, you've checked that box, so distributions on that could begin immediately. So that's one thing I always try to point out. So you just want to make sure you know the rules around that. How do I let them know? How do they qualify, all that stuff. So next up, the other side of cataloging what's there is to understand the liabilities, right? So it's not just all the assets somebody has, but it's, what are the things that need to be paid every month? So it could be a mortgage, it could be utility bills, things like that. And the idea is, one, I want to make sure that if something happens, my loved one is incapacitated, these payments still need to be made. If it's an older individual, typically they're not on an automated basis, right? They used to cut the check, mail it in. So I do want to try to set that up if it is possible when somebody's in good health, so that that payment continues. And then also you never want to have a foreclosure situation, right? Where somebody couldn't get into the account, the payment wasn't made, and then now the house is at risk. So that's obviously something we want to avoid. Then in terms of actually leveraging the assets that you have, I talked about this a little bit before with regard to retirement or investment accounts. Don't be afraid of using a home equity line of credit to pull money out of a home to be able to pay for care expenses. So I always encourage people to do this when they're healthy or when they have income, right? So it'll be much easier to apply for this credit when you're in those situations, to do those things, even if you're in this situation. Nicole?
Yes, you're back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, we missed a few lines of what you said. If you could go back a little bit.
No problem. So the point here is, the sooner you can do those things, the better. Often with a line of credit, you don't necessarily need to draw down on it to have it open, right? You could just have it open, have it available, have it ready to go in case you need to pull that, trigger and be able to access cash that way. The final point I want to make on the slide is, obviously, in some of these cases, we care for loved ones that are in terminal situations. And what I would say around that is, make sure you talk to an attorney, get an understanding of how does debt transfer if a loved one has significant medical debt or credit card debt that may ultimately go unpaid. I'm not saying per se to leverage that as a strategy, but it is something that I would seriously consider, right? So if you had an individual who is married, that may not be a good option. But if you have somebody who's single and no one else's names are on the account, that might be an option where you say, okay, maybe I do consider leveraging a lot of debt, and let me understand what happens to that if they do pass. So like I said, definitely talk to an attorney about that. So again, it's obviously ideal to make the phone calls to these institutions when everybody's young, healthy, everything's good. Not always the case, but important to do when somebody you're caring for is, there's a potential for them to become incapacitated and unable to, verify themselves or, be able to call in with you. To do these things when you can. In my experience, most institutions say, look, so-and-so's got to be on the phone for me to be able to answer your questions. So they have to do the authentication and then allow me to ask those questions. You want to consider, okay, call them, ask them the questions. Who can take money out of the account? If you do, where does it go, right? Sometimes clients have it set up where it's automatically linked to somewhere else and the transfer just automatically goes there. Okay, well, where is that? Who is listed to have access on the account? Can I add someone? So maybe I'm responsible for the care of my mother, but I decide with my brother, hey, he's going to be the one who's going to call and take care of all this stuff. Not always not everybody has that, but certainly something we want to look at. With regard to other topics of conversation with family members, the more that you can discuss this with them on a joint basis and get them all on the same page, the easier this process is going to be. I know, trust me, I hear so many stories of people that, this person, they're problematic from this standpoint. I get it. I appreciate that. That's where I would really leverage somebody who's going to be kind of a third party, right? That advisor or that CPA who can kind of help make clear decisions or at least steer that person in the right direction. You want to limit surprises. Often I find kids don't really, I say kids, adult children don't really know what their parents have in place. So you don't want to get to that stage and then say, oh, I thought mom had, X, Y, and Z to be able to take care of herself, and turns out she doesn't. So find these things out now before you get deep into the expenses of care. And you want it to really be a collective game plan. Again, like I'm not necessarily advertising for myself, but do find a trusted advisor. If you feel like your advisor's not giving you the right decisions, ask your friends, call around, talk to people who have been through it, find somebody that you're going to be able to lean on and they're giving you good, clear guidance. And then they're also going to be able to help you make decisions when you're just not in that frame of mind. Or, like in the scenario I spoke of before, there's a lot of cleanup that's got to happen. They're going to help you with that. So it's not 20 accounts, maybe it's 5. So that would be ideal, just less things to worry about. Next thing is something that Nicole talked about a little bit previously when she, spoke of the care control around healthcare proxy, power of attorney, advanced directives, right? Really important. There oftentimes I meet families where they still have their adult children. They have guardians listed in their wills because they're so old, right? And they haven't redone them. Or it may be a scenario where somebody's young and they just haven't hit that point in their life. I highly encourage you, if you can do it when they're healthy-ish, or where they're in a mental place to be able to do that, it will save you a lot of heartache. I always try to give the example, which is an upsetting one, of a couple that I worked with. I met the wife after the husband had passed away. He was in his early 50s, no will in place. And sometimes I get the pushback from clients of, $2,000 for a will or whatever it is. That's kind of expensive. This particular couple, I think the wife has paid anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 in legal expenses just to work through settling the estate. And this is not a complicated example, but I try to give that as perspective of cost, right? Look at the cost then at that point. So all these things are going to be really important. You may want to work with somebody who's specialized in this area, right? Like an elder care attorney or somebody who has experience with, maybe you want to look at a Medicaid trust or something a little bit more complex that could assist with the financial situation. And then lastly, like, where are those documents kept? Does somebody have a copy of them? Can they be accessed, especially the healthcare proxy if you need it? And then on the next slide, so obviously there's people that have already gone down this path. Maybe you've heard all these things. Might be a good time to have another set of eyes on everything. Don't be afraid to bounce it. I work as a financial advisor in primarily that capacity. I encourage my clients, talk to your CPA, talk to your accountant, see what they say. You get a different perspective. We're all in the same boat. We're trying to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. Again, find somebody who's trustworthy. Your gut's going to kind of tell you that. And then there's plenty of programs from my experience that I've seen where they offer assistance to people that maybe they can't afford to pay for an attorney, right? Or maybe they can't afford to pay for somebody to come in and consult. So there's ones that you can look at. Certainly with an advisor or a CPA, ask for an initial consultation. That'll be a little bit cheaper. So for people that are knee-deep in the process already, I would say the long-term care disability insurance is a big area of focus that I would revisit. So now you may be in the scenario where previously they didn't meet the criteria to be able to qualify for long-term care, or they didn't meet the definition of disability. So I would say in those cases, make sure, revisit those, understand those definitions. Some retirement plans at work, like pensions, may have a disability component. Try to understand that, see if you would qualify. Maybe you prefer a lump sum payment, so you want to understand that. And if there's one thing that I could give you guys as a takeaway throughout my whole presentation, which is probably not what you would expect, I cannot tell you the number of times that if I call a financial institution and I don't get somebody helpful on the phone, I say, I'm sorry, I think there's a problem with my connection. I hang up and I call back until I get somebody really helpful who will save me so much time and so much stress. And so I highly encourage you guys to do that. I especially see that with a lot of governmental agencies too. So I really encourage you to do that. You'd be surprised how often I'm then able to get the information really quickly instead of getting passed around or dealing with somebody who's having a bad day. In terms of cost of the actual care, one thing I'll throw out there, some people haven't, which might be a little surprising, at-home care could be less expensive than working with facilities. That's something I would start to look at. There's going to be federal or state programs that could assist you with that, right? In addition to long-term care policies that might cover they might prefer to pay for the at-home care. You want to shop out your prescription costs, use, apps, websites. In my personal experience, I found like nurses or admin staff in the doctor's office are like, hey, you know what, check out this place or try this. Really helpful, always ask. There's drug companies that offer specific programs. And then I've also seen clients negotiate bills downward, right? So here's what it was. They kind of fought it a bit. Here's where they got it to be. And then they, said, ultimately, this is what I'm going to pay. So you're trying to stretch that dollar as much as you can. And then lastly, so for those of you that are providing 40 plus hours, like Nicole was saying, can you be paid as a caregiver? So I have a client who has a disabled son, who's an adult son. She found a program in New York State that allowed her to be compensated. So she was working, she's a single mom, she was working 2 jobs. That additional compensation allowed her to be able to not work the 2 jobs. She worked 1, and then the rest of the time she's paid to care for her son. And then, same goes around long-term care policies. Some of them will pay for somebody who's not a nurse, but just, a child or, relative or family member or loved one that can help pay for that care. Obviously, that sometimes it creates a little stress with a spouse. So if, let's say, I have to bring a loved one into the home and then I'm no longer working the job I normally would work 40 hours a week, and now I'm concentrated on this, utilize that outside advisor to be able to help you with those difficult conversations and create a plan around it. That's, the part of that role as an advisor is like you plan for the good and you plan for the bad too, and they help you through both of those aspects. Another area I just want to mention is for those of you in the New York, New Jersey, several states, there is New York paid family leave, or whatever that state is. They have coverage for you to be compensated if you leave to care for a loved one. And there's also protection for your job. So you want to understand what that is. Maybe it's unpaid, but you want to at least know I can go back to work once this person's back on their feet or is able to move on with that. Then utilize other programs that can pay for things that you can delegate out, basically. So thank you for that. Sorry, I hope I didn't go on too long with that, Nicole. I appreciate that.
You did not. So thank you very much. And okay, we have a question here. Can you deduct nursing home fees on your taxes? Do you know?
Actually, so one thing I would say is, so I'm working with a client now who we're having her claim her parents as her dependents. So you want to try to understand what's the best route. So it may not just be, okay, can I deduct the nursing expenses that they pay? You may want to go to the extent of having them on your return and understanding, okay, how would I do that? What's the benefit to me to do that? Maybe I'm shelling out some of these expenses and I want to get covered for it. So it's a good question. I would ask your accountant what the right strategy is.
Great. And I'm going to repeat um, Teresa's a little bit about Teresa, just in case you missed it. So this is Teresa Steinkamp, and a financial advisor and CPA at Cornerstone Wealth Advisory. She has worked in client services for over 20 years and helps individuals, families, and business owners make important decisions with their finances. And certainly caregiving is one of them. And everybody that comes on a Care Answered webinar as part of the Care Answered family that we've trusted, we've worked with, we've sent our clients, our family, our loved ones to seek assistance from them. So I definitely suggest you reach out to them for more individualized assistance. So with that being said, let me introduce our next speaker. Again, part of the Care Answered family is Liz Vaz. Elizabeth Vaz is a mediator and collaborative divorce attorney based on Long Island. Her passion is assisting families resolve conflict with dignity and confidentiality and without ever going to court. So you might think, why do we have this kind of attorney? Well, because if you know her, her passion is exactly that. It's about family law and helping families get the most out of each other and making that relationship so helpful for not only the children, but for themselves. And she gives out these great tips and advice about how to stay married and how to work through those emotional ups and downs. So I'm really so happy to have you here, Elizabeth, and I'm going to bring up your slide in just a moment, but please begin.
Sure. Well, first, let me say thank you. Right, Nicole, you always give fantastic webinars, and this is really a much needed topic, right? Much needed webinar because it's a really dynamic topic, and so many families are really going through this, right? There's a lot of families who are in this position where they are the caregivers for their parents, their siblings, while they're still caring for their children, right? That sandwich generation. There are people who really are trying to work a full-time job, sometimes two full-time jobs, and then care for their loved ones as well. And if you think that that's stressful on the individual, of course it is, but it's very, very stressful on relationships. So, you know, just like you said, I'm a divorce attorney, a family law attorney, but I really believe very strongly in marriage and in commitment, right? When you're committed in a relationship, my goal is to help you try to see the bigger picture. And if there's any way to work it out, then certainly do that. And the reality is, in times of stress and you know, conflict like this, it's a really, really challenging time for families. I think one of the statistics that you talked about at the beginning, that 25% of baby boomers who had been divorced said that caregiving was one of the components that really led to that divorce. That doesn't surprise me at all. And I think when you really think about, you know, whether it's the Gen X, the Gen Z, the millennials, like all of the different age groups that are coming up, all of us are really going to be caregivers. Like you said at the very beginning, right? We had been, we will be, we're going to need caregivers, or, you know, we're a support system to our families in so many different ways. So we have to be able to navigate that in a way that really just makes sense for everyone. So I just have 7 sort of brief tips about how it is that we can help maintain those relationships. And these relationships can be, right, our significant other. Again, you know, I'm a family law attorney and divorce attorney, so that focus is really on your paramour, whether it's your whether you're married or you're not, but also other family members, right? Other support systems, whether it's siblings or aunts and uncles and cousins. We really want to foster those relationships and make sure that we have each other to rely on. So number 1, we want to be able to talk openly and honest with each other about our feelings, about our fears, about our emotions, all the stresses that are hitting us, and really keep those lines of communication open. It's not an easy time, right? It's not going to be, you know, kumbaya just because we're talking about it, but it really does help. It helps alleviate it so you don't feel like you're in a bubble. And there are times when actually it can help the two of you bond. It can help people form a foundation around what this issue is, and then they can start to brainstorm different ways to help them resolve it. Number 2, make a concerted effort to keep your relationship alive, right? And I know that sometimes that seems like, no, there's just too much stuff going on. Again, I'm working a job, I'm working 2 full-time jobs, I'm caring for somebody. Maybe sometimes that seems like it's too much to do. take it in little pieces. I promise you that the rewards will really, they'll outweigh the work that it feels like you're doing, right? Whether it's, again, just going for a little walk, whether it's just communicating for 5 minutes at the end of the day, just sending each other texts. Right now, communication is so easy now. And just keeping those lines of communication open, very, very important. Building on what Teresa was saying, approaching all of your legal, financial challenges, any issues that you're having, keeping all of those lines of communication open, and knowing that you're a team, right? Working within a teamwork framework, whether, again, it is working with your financial advisor, working with that attorney, working with a sibling, a family member, no matter who it is, that communication is key. And doing it, just like Teresa said, if you can, before the crisis hits, right? Because sometimes you just don't know when it's going to hit, and that's understandable. But as much as you can alleviate beforehand, it's really, really vital. Reaching out to other family members, other people maybe who are going through it. Teresa mentioned maybe delegating it to somebody else. There are certain things that maybe you're not equipped to do, maybe you're not comfortable doing. That's fine. All you have to do is open the door. And I promise you, when you do that, so many more people than you realize are going to be so willing to just help and say, oh, I've been there, or I know somebody who's been there and I can help out and I can connect you with somebody. So again, those financial and legal challenges are really a lot. Again, when it comes to the bank statements, when it comes to accessing any of the documents, powers of attorney, living wills, all of those things. If those are not in place, find a good resource who can help you get them in place. And if they are in place, know exactly where those documents are and communicate it to everyone who might be a caregiver for this person. Number 4, blame. Blame is very easy, right? Don't blame each other for what goes wrong, because plenty is going to go wrong. I promise you, things are going to go wrong. But there's going to be a lot that goes right also. So the situation is going to be really, really tough. So you can blame the situation, you can blame the disease, you can, sort of look at it as an institutional issue, but blaming each other just really does nothing for you, and it does nothing for the relationship. You really want to be able to, again, keep that foundation and build each other up, because it's going to help the both of you. I actually have a friend who is an attorney, who is a partner, worked full-time. This is during COVID. Obviously, we're not just talking about that. This is any caregiving situation, but this really hit her, speaking of unexpected, right? So she's a partner in her law firm. She works a lot of hours on a good day, has 2 young children. So as soon as COVID hit, the 2 young children went to remote learning. So she had to continue to keep her caseload, her workload as an attorney, care for her 2 children while they were home, help them homeschool. And then her in-laws moved in because one of them I think one of them was already ill, and then the other one got very ill with COVID. So she and her husband was not able to help because he's a doctor. So he was in the hospital, pretty much 24/7. So talk about a breaking point for her, right? She was really in a position where she felt so alone and so isolated, and that blame kind of came out, right? Like, how am I caring for the children and caring for your family members, and I still have to carry my own workload? And it really took a lot of work to take that blame and put it aside, take those emotions and say, you know what, I need to be able to internalize them and make them work in our favor, as opposed to us sort of blaming each other and pitting ourselves against each other, when it's really this disease, it's this illness, it's this situation that's really causing all of this. We do the best we can, right? And we just have to remember that we're human, we do the best we can, and our spouse, our partner, or our family member does the same as well. They're really doing the best that they can. Self-pity. Self-pity is very, very easy to stay stuck in, right? So you can, this is the worst situation ever. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And the truth is, sometimes it is, but staying stuck there will do you no good. So we all have to feel it. We have to internalize it and, recognize it, really, really feel it deep down. And then we have to start to strategize. How are we going to get over this? How are we going to help ourselves, help our family members take the next steps? Because that pity party really, if we stay stuck in it, all it's going to do is pull us down deeper and further, and then isolate us even more. And that's the absolute last thing that we need. Remember that you can always reach out to family members, friends, colleagues, anyone who can lend you an ear and help give you some support. It'll make you a better caregiver. It'll make you a better partner. It'll make you a better communicator, and it'll give you inner peace. just really will, even if it's just little pieces. Number 6, enhancing your relationship by providing occasional time for privacy and solitude. I know how selfish it sounds, right? When you're in the throes of an emergency situation or caregiving and you feel like you're never stopping, right? You're up at 6 in the morning, getting the kids ready, off to work, trying to care for your loved one, trying to navigate the healthcare system, trying to figure out where are all these documents, trying to, trying to take all of this and process it in pieces that are digestible, and then come home and say, I need time for myself. I promise you that time for yourself and that time for your relationship is vital. I mean, it's really, really important, because when I hear people who talk about stresses that they've had when it comes to divorce or splitting, the stresses of not having that time with their spouse is really number one, right? So we all know divorce, a lot of the statistics are a little skewed depending on where you are, but in general, 50% of the people who get married are going to get divorced. And of that 50%, one of the number one reasons people get divorced is finances, right? It's because of the money. It's because of the stress of the money. And again, a big cause of that could be because they're getting pulled in so many different directions. They're spending this huge chunk on caregiving, on family members, while they're trying to raise their family, while they're raising children, all of that. But taking that time for yourself feels like, wow, how am I going to do this, right? Where am I going to get enough money? I have to work more. I have to struggle more. I have to scramble and really hustle more. But if you are not there for yourself and you're not able to take that time for yourself, how are you going to be there for somebody else? How are you going to be able to get the finances straightened out? How are you going to be able to take that next step to make sure that you're financially secure, move on from there? So having that little bit of time, whether it's just, again, talking to your paramour, talking to your spouse, having a little bit of, private time on the side, or whether you actually go out on a date, whether you go for a walk, just have a dinner, just something that really connects the both of you. I promise you, it's going to give you a lot more inner peace, and it'll help you then move forward and be able to say, you know what, now I have sort of filled my cup a little bit, and now I'm able to give a little bit more. Number 7, remember that the simple things matter in marriage, and you want to be able to practice those every day. Those little rituals, whether it's, just, I don't know, talking to each other at the end of every day, making lunch for each other, religion, right? Religion and customs and those kind of things. Those are really, really important to people. And you want to try very, very hard not to lose that. It's a struggle. It's a challenge. And I'm not saying that it's easy to do, because you have so many real crises facing you, right, that you have to address. But a lot of people find solace in those rituals and the customs that they've sort of set out for themselves in the past. And it really helps them continue down a path of some sense of normalcy and give them peace. And never forget the power of touch, if people like that, right? But I think that most people, when they're sort of going 50 miles an hour down this one-lane highway and they have this tunnel vision, it's just about really taking care of one crisis after the next, after the next. When you take a step back, sometimes you really have to connect with people on an emotional level, but sometimes even on a physical level. Whether you're holding hands or you're giving a hug or you're just, grasping someone's arm and just reminding them it's okay, I'm here. And, there are so many studies that show, right, the physiological effects of that are really, really important. And whether it's our loved one, whether it's another family member, if it's the person even that we're caring for, it's really, really important. Some people they don't respond well to touching, so you really have to know who that person is. But if they do, don't forget to do that, right? Again, just a simple rub on the back, just a simple tap sometimes is just enough. But it's really important just to know who it is that you are with, who it is that you're caring for, and remember that that's really the foundation that you want to keep. Another one is forgiveness, because you can do all of this, and I promise you're going to muck it up, because we're human. We're going to forget something. You were supposed to pick up the medication. You were going to be in charge of this. I was going to do that. And then somebody drops the ball, because that's what, again, this is just life. We're human. We have to remember to forgive each other. We have to remember that we're all really doing the best we can. And when at the end of the day, if we can forgive each other and then regroup, pick up and then say, you know what, let's move forward tomorrow. And we're going to try this in a different direction. We're going to try to do this differently. Maybe you try to start to set up a calendar where you're not going to forget, where we're going to schedule things a little differently. You're never going to get it right the first time. You're not going to get it right the second time, and maybe not the third or fourth. And I know that from experience, right? I work full time. I'm the principal attorney here
Right, I'm just
at my
gonna
law
listen
firm.
after if Jonathan Mawari calls,
And-
just let him know to hold on, all right?
Okay.
And I'm also the caregiver of my mother. My mother is, she's going to be 86 in a few weeks. And she has slight dementia. She requires a lot of care, and it really takes a village, right? I could not do this on my own. I couldn't do it without my significant other, without my adult children helping. And we really rely on each other to do that. And sometimes I really can't do it today, right? And I need somebody else to step in and help out. And sometimes it's my spouse who says, I really can't do this today. I need somebody to step in and help out, because it really is a lot. And we need to make sure that we're there for each other and that we're open and honest about it, because there are days when, okay, I can do it. I can handle it. And the next day can be the same exact situation. And I can't do it. I'm just too emotionally overwhelmed. I have too much going on at work, whatever it is. We just have to make sure that we're there for each other. And again, these tips and these ideas are true for any relationship. Again, whether it's a paramour, whether it's your spouse, or siblings, extended family, just being open and honest and keeping those lines of communication open, they're really, really important. This is a very stressful time, and we just have to remember that it's temporary. Even though it doesn't feel like it, this will not last forever. And then when the time comes that we need care, we want to make sure that we're preparing all of our documents, all of our family members, that we're sort of preparing as much as we can to know that we want to lessen the burden on those caregivers for us down the road as well. So, obviously I'm open to any questions here, but I really just encourage everybody to really reach out to Nicole, to somebody like Teresa, to get as much information as you can and really start to frame everything now before a crisis happens. Again, sometimes these things hit us out of nowhere, but as much as we can plan and prepare in advance, I promise you it really will make a big difference.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was excellent. And one of the things I'll just say, again, with the control partners that I mentioned, healthcare proxy at the age of 18, that's when you get a healthcare proxy. There's been so many unfortunate stories that we've probably heard and kind of shrugged off, but people even going to their children going to college far away, they can't get any information because there's no healthcare proxy and they're considered grown. Maybe not to you, but to the eyes of the law, they are. So just really important. I do think we have some questions. Donna asked, and I think this is for Teresa. What exactly is a trusted contact? What exactly can a trusted contact do relating to a person's finances?
That's a good question. So in my experience, it differs according to each financial institution. So in theory, you should have access to statements, things like that. Whether or not you can actually transact, in my experience, depends on the institution. And then one thing I should point out is that, as Nicole was saying, all your estate planning documents are really important. But the other caveat is that not every financial institution allows your power of attorney to be their power of attorney. So I would find out as you're making those phone calls, is there an additional set of paperwork for me to be able to call in and make decisions or get access to money? And you may decide, okay, maybe it's easier for me just to actually go in and go into my mom's account or do whatever I need to do. And you may decide to change the titling to do that, right? So that's different than adding that as a trusted contact.
Absolutely. And I'll just speak, I am not an attorney, but I work with great elder law attorneys and special needs attorneys. And one of the things I will say that I do know about is that there's a new power of attorney, because that was a issue for ever for my clients too. You know, somebody did the power of attorney and now they want access to the bank, which you would think that would allow. And each institution, financial institution, was saying, no, that's not enough. That's not enough. So as far as I understand, even if you have a power of attorney, get it looked at by your elder law attorney, because there's new ones and it will make that a lot easier. Meaning the onus is not on you to provide the documentation that you can prove it if you have the appropriate power of attorney. So that's really excellent point. And then June had a question: is Medicaid divorce common and practiced in New York? I'm going to say a few words on that because I never heard of that. I got to be honest, until very recently, in which somebody told me that their elder law attorney said, well, you're just going to have to get a divorce so that you can get Medicaid. What I will say is don't do that until you have spoken with an elder law attorney in the state that you live in. Because in my experience, again, not an attorney, it's not necessary. But again, speak to your elder law attorney. Again, I repeat, elder law attorney, to make sure that you're understanding exactly what you're doing. Because I would hate to see somebody, and that's what almost happened to the client that reached out to me. They said to get a divorce, so we were trying to do that. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know if Liz, you have any more to say about that.
So yeah, I will say, again, you're right. You need to speak to an attorney who is skilled in that, because I believe in New York, there's a spousal refusal that you can do. So you don't have to necessarily do that. The caveats and nuances of it, I'm not familiar with, but I do know that there are plenty of people who have gotten divorced for that reason. And here in New York, I believe that you can elect some type of spousal refusal. So it's sort of, you know, again, we understand that being married is a contract, but in this contract, you can sort of elect out and select that spousal refusal. I'm not an elder law attorney, so the specifics of it, I don't know how that's done, but I am aware of that. So unfortunately, like Nicole, like you said, there are plenty of people who have done that and they didn't necessarily need to. So really consult with an attorney who is skilled in that area.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? I'm looking in my chat. If you want to come off mute, if that's more comfortable for you, and ask any questions. All right. Well, I will let you know that Care Answered is having their caregiver support and empowerment group next Thursday at 6 p.m. You can go on our website and look for that. So that'll be, I'm really excited to start that off. And thank you again so much, Teresa and Liz, for sharing this important information. Please get in contact with them because they have lots of vital information that we all need. And it might be really helpful for you in your situation or in your families or loved ones or friends situations. So thank you all. Thanks for being here. Take care.
Thank you, Nicole.